it from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
And welcome to On the Money, your daily weekday dose of economics, business and consumer news. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour we'll be talking about how families can survive the financial cost of Christmas, after a new report found that around 8 million people living in the UK want to cancel the festive season due to financial worries. All that plus an in-depth Money Talks interview all the way from Sutton Coldfield, you lucky people. But first, it's the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
I'm Rosie Wright. This is your news at 1 o'clock. The Cabinet is expected to meet this afternoon to discuss the latest situation around COVID-19. Some ministers have reportedly pushed back against calls from scientific advisors for new restrictions before Christmas. According to the Times newspaper, around a third of the Cabinet is said to be reluctant to introduce new measures in the next few days. The government's chief scientific advisor, though, Sir Patrick Vallance, is urging for tightened rules to prevent the NHS from being overwhelmed. Hospitality leaders are urging the Chancellor to offer emergency financial support in the next 24 hours after a fall in bookings due to the Omicron variant. The operator of the Real Greek and Franco Manca restaurant chains say rescue packages are needed regardless of whether COVID measures are introduced. Meanwhile, the chief executive of the Nighttime Industries Association, Michael Kill, told GB News the new restrictions are confusing, with businesses encouraged to stay open, but customers told to stay away.
We're hugely concerned, not only for the survival of businesses, but people's livelihoods. People that we've committed and managed to build up and gain momentum for this trade is now being stifled massively. COVID passes were presented as a mitigation that would keep nightclubs open. That's clearly not the case. And the concern that we have is at some point leading up to New Year's Eve is going to create some level of displacement. And that could go into things like illegal events or push people back into households, but which we know full well are, highly transmissible.
Labour is also urging for greater support for businesses throughout the festive period. They're calling for the reintroduction of sick pay for employees who've tested positive with COVID-19 or those who have to self-isolate with symptoms.
What you don't want in a situation like this is businesses and workers having to calculate, should we do the right thing here or is there a cost to us? So it's really important that we've got a good sick pay system in place and one that is also helpful to the small businesses involved.
The Deputy Prime Minister has denied that his colleagues broke lockdown rules after a picture emerged showing the Prime Minister and his staff having cheese and wine in the Downing Street garden during the first national lockdown. The Guardian newspaper released this photograph showing the Prime Minister drinking at a table with Carrie Johnson, 2 others and 16 other staff members nearby. Dominic Raab stressed the garden was a place of work and that sometimes staff would have a drink after a long day or a long week. Retired teachers are being urged to return to the profession to try to help with COVID staff shortages in the new year. Some schools are already preparing for the possibility of online learning, but the Education Secretary is appealing for qualified teachers across primary, secondary and further education to return to classrooms to try to maintain face-to-face teaching.
Now, although 99.9% of schools have consistently been opened this term, we can all see the tidal wave of Omicron coming our way. Whether you're recently retired or trained as a teacher and have moved profession, I urge you to consider whether you might be able to spare even a day a week to bolster the numbers of supply staff available around the country.
Away from the pandemic now, and sandwich chain Pret-a-Manger has been told to consider reviewing its advertising campaign for a £20 a month coffee subscription after reports of complaints from customers. Well, it's advice from the Advertising Standards Authority. Pret subscribers can choose 5 drinks every day as part of the deal. But customers have complained they were often unable to get smoothies on the deal, as many shops said they were unable to make them. The World Economic Forum has delayed its annual summit in Davos following concerns over the Omicron variant of coronavirus. The conference, held in the Swiss mountain resort, sees major political and business leaders from around the globe attending. The meeting will instead be held in the early summer. Television presenter Rachel Riley has been awarded £10,000 in damages after winning a libel case against a former aide to Jeremy Corbyn. The Countdown presenter sued Laura Murray over a tweet that was found to be defamatory. At the time, Miss Murray was a manager in the then Labour leader's office. The High Court judge said the tweet posted more than 2 years ago had caused serious harm to Rachel Riley's reputation and that she was due vindication. You are right up to date here on GB News. I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour. For now, though, on the money.
And this is On the Money. Today, Christmas and the New Year are meant to be a time of comfort and joy, according to the carol God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen. Yet for many households, the festive season and the money spent on presents, food, travel and all the rest of it is a time when serious strain is put on family finances. We're highlighting a new report and hosting an in-depth discussion on surviving the financial cost of Christmas. Plus, today's Money Talks interview is with Steve Hardiman, the Managing Director of Cleveland Fasteners, a company which manufactures small components for commercial and automotive markets. Steve will be telling us about his vision for the future of both Cleveland Fasteners and UK manufacturing.
People think, particularly youngsters coming into manufacturing, perhaps it's not for me. You know, perhaps all of this negativity is right. It's not. It's the best kind of business in the world.
That's later in the show, and as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. Are you worried about your finances over the Christmas period? On the Money's your show too, so get in touch. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @GBNews. So stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on the Money. It was back in 1843 that Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol. The celebrated writer's anti-poverty novella was a strange idea, said his publishers, and they refused to meet the full publication costs. So Dickens stumped up the money himself, then switched to a rival publisher, and his masterpiece has since never been out of print. Dickens was indeed shocked and disgusted at living conditions amongst Britain's poorest during the Industrial Revolution, and he set out to write a ghost story that would be, in his words, a sledgehammer blow on behalf of poor children, bringing their plight to public attention with what the author called 20,000 times the force of any government statement. While the UK no longer has children working in factories and families starving on the streets, we do still have a poverty problem in this country. Poverty these days tends to be relative rather than absolute, with people very rarely left without the most basic provisions, but left far, far poorer than much of the rest of society, which means they can't participate in aspects of life which the rest of us take for granted. Consider a new report from the Centre for Social Justice, based on polling evidence that no fewer than 8 million people living in the UK, representing around a quarter of all households, have said they want to cancel Christmas due to financial worries. As inflation spirals and for many of us wages aren't keeping up with price rises, the UK's cost of living crisis, which we often highlight here on The Money, is now starting to bite. The Centre for Social Justice found that 22% of us will this year cut back on Christmas presents for our loved ones due to fears of rising debt. 33%, a third of us, will borrow to cover the costs of Christmas presents and food. And 9%, almost 1 in 10, say they're using or will use unregulated buy now, pay later credit sources, meaning they'll pay higher rates of interest and could end up chased by debt collectors in the new year. There's clearly a growing generational divide here in Britain, made worse by lockdown. Nearly 1 in 5 18 to 34-year-olds reports they're living in financial hardship, while only 1 in 20 of those who are 55 or older say the same. Without reliable credit options, the Centre for Social Justice warns the UK could face a surge in so-called hidden debts, where vulnerable people find themselves forced to borrow from friends, family members, and even illegal sources, such as dangerous loan sharks. The poll also showed that severe debt problems can have a detrimental effect on close relationships. More than a quarter of us who've experienced problems with debts say our relationships with spouses and partners have been damaged by financial concerns. There's nothing in the world so irresistibly contagious as laughter and good humour, Dickens wrote in A Christmas Carol. And after the year we've all had, I'd say we all need some of that. But the pressures of Christmas and the New Year make it one of the most financially demanding times in the calendar, where too many fall into debt they can't repay. And while the horrors of Victorian England are thankfully no longer with us, there is still genuine poverty across Britain, a scandal which must be addressed. And that's our On the Money question today. How can families survive the financial cost of Christmas? As regular viewers know, what we do here on The Money is we have in-depth discussions with people who really know their stuff. And so it's a pleasure to be joined by Matthew Greenwood, who is from the Centre for Social Justice. He's been leading their research on hidden debt, which I mentioned. We also have Richard Lane, the Director for External Affairs at Step Change, a very reputable debt charity. We also have friend of the show, Helen Thomas, Miss Blonde Money herself, in the studio alongside me. Matt, let's come to you first. I hope you feel I did the report justice in my opening remarks. To what extent do you think the situation now, with Christmas being financially testing for lots of families, is worse than in previous years?
Well, look, Liam, I think that actually every single year people say they think they're going to spend more on Christmas than they probably should. So that's not necessarily unique to this year or kind of this time of year. But what we do know is that actually 6 million people in the pandemic have missed an essential bill, be that their council tax, their rent, or an electricity or energy bill, something that you just cannot go without.
Wow.
And that, you know, by and large, is a result of the pandemic, because we know that low-income people who have been forced to stay at home just didn't have the same cushy ride that it felt like some of the rest of us had when we were able to sit at home behind our desk throwing money into the piggy bank. So actually the pandemic has had a real effect. And I think that's now why we're seeing that 8 million people, according to polling by the Centre for Social Justice, are saying that they are worried about falling into unmanageable debt this year.
Let's go to Richard Lane of Step Change. Richard, Matthew's laid out the problem for us. I mean, he's very much a researcher. He's dealing with numbers and polling evidence. But as you know, CSJ does a lot of work with charities on the ground across the regions, dealing with case studies all the time. And I know Step Change does as well. Christmas is always a time where there's lots of debt flying around. Do you think families are particularly vulnerable now as the cost of living spirals off the back of this pandemic?
I mean, I think what's so powerful about this report is that it does really echo the more than 500,000 people that we help every single year, their experiences. We know, as the report points out, that our clients have been getting younger because younger people are more financially vulnerable. We know that it's people in gig economy jobs, as we've just talked about. who are much less likely to have financial stability, much less likely to have been furloughed, much less likely to be able to work from home. So we have absolutely seen a pandemic of two halves. And I think it has just accelerated some of those trends we've seen over the last decade. And yes, we are seeing a huge surge in people getting in touch with us with these kind of concerns. So, for example, last month, we saw a 5-fold increase in people visiting our website to search for worries about utility bills, for example. So there are a huge amount of people who are worried out there.
That's amazing. 5-fold increase in people coming to Step Change's website because of the utility bills, Helen. The utility bills are, of course, one of the centrepieces of this cost of living crisis. The cap on household bills is going to go up again in April. That's pretty clear given where wholesale gas prices are. I mean, you and I, we nerd on about inflation all the time here in the studio, but there's some real human impact here, isn't there, in this cost of living crisis?
Yeah, I think it's great that you're looking into this because, you know, economists, as you say, we sit and we talk about this funny concept of inflation and the Bank of England's targets, but this is real money for people and it really matters. And, you know, this is part of the difficulty, I suppose, when you're a policymaker is how do you deal with this? Because what we're hearing is, you know, it's two halves. It's even more than two halves, isn't it? It's certain sectors, it's certain people who are hit even harder. But, of course, a central bank has to go with the overall view and the long-term view. And Rishi Sunak would say he's trying to do the same thing. But I think, you know, this is this point about inflation, which is this number that floats around, whether it's 4%, 5%, 6%. For some people, it's hundreds of percent.
Yeah.
And beyond that, whatever the number is, it's actually just unmanageable.
And inflation hits the poor hardest, doesn't it? I mean, we know that from history. As you've done your research, Matthew, to what extent do you think people are getting themselves into debt? We've had such a difficult year. You know, families have been apart. You know, fingers and toes crossed, families can come together this Christmas. We still don't know for sure, but that's the way it looks for now. Again, fingers crossed. Do you think there's a particular problem this year of indebtedness because of all these factors?
Well, I think that, as I said, the kind of that 6 million figure that we know people are already behind on bills as it is. But the pandemic has had a kind of huge effect because about 15% of people who have a household income of less than £20,000 reported having absolutely nothing in savings at all before the pandemic hit. And I think that's why it is a real problem this year. And as you mentioned, inflation is high at about kind of 5%, and that energy price rise is also hitting families hard. And it is the people at the very bottom who are going to suffer particularly badly under this. And I think what we're worried about at the Centre for Social Justice is that this year the UK could face a surge of hidden debt as a result of people needing credit but not getting it, because their need for money won't evaporate. They'll just find other places to get it. And that involves either friends or family or, worse, pernicious illegal loan sharks.
We will come on to that, Matthew. We will be carrying on this discussion after the break. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. We will be joined after this break by Matthew Greenwood, again from the Centre for Social Justice, Richard Lane of Step Change Debt Charity, and, of course, friend of the show, Helen Thomas, here in the studio. It's a really important subject. How can families survive the financial strain of Christmas? Stay with us. You're On the Money.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. It's simply more of the same for many of us today. Cloudy again across large parts of the country. Something a little brighter in the east as the cloud lifts, and somewhat breezy in the southwest on the edge of this area of high pressure where the isobars are a little closer together. Now, this cold front, barely noticeable on the map there, will introduce some slightly drier air and higher cloud bases, I think, through the afternoon across parts of eastern Scotland into eastern England. And that will, although keeping things cloudy, turn things a little brighter into the afternoon, whilst low cloud sits further west, covering the hills, bringing a few spots of drizzle. There will be some broken cloud, West Wales, western parts of England, western Scotland. Some sunshine coming through here. A breezy afternoon to come in the far southwest. I'm feeling a little on the cold side, but temperatures not far from average for the time of year. Into the evening and overnight, as that higher cloud drifts west, there will be some breaks developing, especially in the west and through central parts. And where that happens, we'll see a touch of frost, temperatures dipping 0 to -2 Celsius. Otherwise, low single figures to start things off on Tuesday. Again, a lot of cloud covering the map, but I think a better chance through the day of some cloud breaks, especially for parts of Wales into central, western England, and where we see some cloud breaks, some decent sunny spells emerging. So for a lucky few, a sunny day, but for many, another cloudy day, and a bit colder again, temperatures of 4 to 6 Celsius, and still rather breezy towards the far southwest. Outbreaks of rain or drizzle affecting the far north and northwest of Scotland, staying fairly damp here through Tuesday. But for the vast majority of the UK, it is a dry day, albeit rather cloudy. That's set to change on Wednesday. Areas of rain move north across the country, turning to snow over northern hills later.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Welcome back. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Supposedly, this is the most wonderful time of year. Another Carol reference. But for many families who find themselves in financial hardship, Christmas can, of course, be a stressful and anxious period. Now, a new report from the Centre for Social Justice shows that up to 8 million people living in the UK, representing around a quarter of all households, may want to cancel the festive season due to financial worries. To discuss this report, I'm still with my expert panel. And Matthew Greenwood, let's go to you. Again, as we said just before the break, you're a researcher, you're looking at polling analysis, you're looking at spreadsheets, but you've also been, as you do at the Centre for Social Justice, looking at real hard case studies.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me tell you about a woman called Becky. Becky moved to Tees Valley. She was a 40-year-old single mum who was struggling to make ends meet. And she was presented to by someone in her neighbourhood who welcomed her, who was genuinely kind, and Becky borrowed money from her, knowing that she had nowhere else to go. She didn't have a credit card. She couldn't get credit from anywhere else. And this woman said, I'll give you 50 quid, pay me 100 back a month later. And she did, and Becky was groomed into being
some rate of interest.
A good customer.
100%?
100%,
monthly rate of interest.
And
crikey.
What happened was, eventually, Becky fell behind on payments because there are ups and downs and they affect your life. And this friend turned out not to be a friend. And actually, what they did is they text Becky and they text her kids, telling her that if she didn't pay up, she said to her, they text her kids saying, make sure your mum pays up or I can't stop them coming. And this is what we would refer to as the elusive Mr. Big. And this got so stressful.
Loan sharks.
Loan shark, exactly. And this got so stressful that Becky tried to end her life. And you know what the worst part of all, Liam? The worst part of all is that when it was investigated, it turned out Mr. Big didn't exist.
Yeah, yeah.
This was simply coercion at an extremely high APR rate that has a real damaging effect on families across the country. And that's why we're worried now at Christmas, because if people can't make ends meet, where are they going to go?
They go to the twilight lenders, don't they? The doorstep loan sharks. Richard Lane, this is very much your specialism. How unusual is the story that Matthew Greenwood just told?
Well, sadly, it's not unusual at all. I mean, our clients overwhelmingly tell us they absolutely know how to budget. They've squeezed every penny that they can. But ultimately, you can only spin those plates for so long until something goes wrong or something falls over. And you do have to turn to high-cost credit. And that is an extreme example, which we do hear from our clients, them turning to illegal loan sharks. But actually, the interest rates and the APR on legitimate credit that actually lots of people have to turn to, payday loans and types of loans like that, are also astronomically high. And you might be taking out credit in the short term that you think you're able to pay back. You say, well, you know, we can do it this month and we'll be able to pay it back next month. But if something else goes wrong, the washing machine breaks or the car breaks down, it's amazing how quickly these things can spiral out of control for people and put them in a situation where they just can't recover from that problem debt that they've built up.
Richard, briefly, there's been a lot of attempts by governments of various shades to further regulate payday loans, twilight end of the debt and credit market, haven't they? But it never seems to happen. Why doesn't it happen?
I think we have made progress. I think we do have kind of a cleaner, more regulated credit market than we used to do. Actually, what we're seeing more and more from our clients who come to us is it's not the financial products that have caused harm, although they are having to turn to high-cost credit. It's actually just that the safety net that exists in society simply is not enough for them to be able to get by. So we talk a lot more these days as a charity about issues like universal credit, which we know our clients rely on, ensuring that there is actually some sort of safety net that exists so that people don't have to turn to high-cost credit in the first place. We've also been pushing for a no-interest loan scheme, which the Treasury is currently piloting, which is an absolutely fantastic step forward. So if, you know, your washing machine breaks, there is going to be a no-interest loan scheme pilot for households to turn to in the future if that's successful, which could be a real game changer for people.
Very interesting, Richard. I want you to stay in touch with On The Money about that pilot scheme and we can ascertain how it's going and tell our viewers. We're going to hear a lot more of this in the new year, aren't we? Inflation is going to go up before it goes down. We're already at 5.1%. The Bank of England is saying 6%. 6% inflation can hit poor people really badly, particularly if their wages aren't keeping up.
Yeah, and we just had that Bank of England rate rise, of course, that we were in here discussing at the end of last week. But yes, you know, if wages catch up to inflation, then, you know, that mitigates some of the issues. But a lot of, you know, imagine the people in this report that we're talking about, you know, not seeing those wage rises, or it's various bits and bobs of professions. And, you know, it's not just about the wages, it's about the jobs. So do people want to be the HGV driver? Can they be if they were a single parent, for example? You know, it's not as easy as all of that, is it? So sometimes as economists, we talk about, inflation versus wages, but actually the reality on the ground is it's just painful for people, whatever happens.
The reality on the ground, that's what we deal with here on The Money. Thank you, Matthew, very much. From the Centre for Social Justice, Helen Thomas, of course, and thank you to Richard Lane as well from the debt charity Step Change. A really important discussion. We will carry on examining these debt and cost of living issues here on the show. Now, a month ago, the government announced its new rail plan for the North and Midlands. We were told the integrated rail plan meant the proposals to run HS2 trains up to Leeds would now mostly rely on existing lines, and the planned HS2 Birmingham to Leeds eastern leg, known as Phase 2B of the multi-billion-pound supertrain project, will now be scrapped. That's what we were told. But it turns out the government may be keeping all options on the table, which means that those living on the old route of 2B between Birmingham and Leeds have been left in limbo. Our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Kevin Larkin is at the Shimmer housing estate in Mexborough near Doncaster. Kevin, what can you tell me?
Well, yes, Liam, this housing estate, Liam, was very much at the epicentre of some of the changes we've seen on the HS2 route, Phase 2B, as you say. In July 2016, it was revealed that rather than being going through South Yorkshire next to the Meadowhall shopping centre in Sheffield, it was going to come through here at the Shimmer estate. I was here that day in July 2016 where there were people in tears, hugging each other in the street. Most of those people who lived here at the time have moved away. Their homes have been bought by HS2 and are now rented out to other families as well. So when we heard that the HS2 route was shifting again and would mainly rely on the old Midland Main Line track to get up through Yorkshire, many communities which are still impacted breathed a sigh of relief. But it seems it may not be the case. So what the government said when it made its announcement last month is that it would hold a review into how it would get HS2 trains into Leeds. Obviously a huge concern for people like Mayor of West Yorkshire Tracy Brabin and the leader of Leeds City Council James Lewis. They've been saying that it should go up to Leeds. Now the issue is that the homes along this route between Birmingham and Leeds are still what they call safeguarded. So essentially they are blighted by the fact that HS2 is still coming here. And the government has said until that review is complete, they cannot lift the safeguarding, the blight, from these areas, which common sense would suggest to you means that potentially this could still be on the table in some way. Interestingly, HS2 has bought 450 properties along that Phase 2B, the old eastern leg, since 2014, and they're worth a total of £115 million. If and when they're sold, they'll be sold subject to what they call the Critchell Down rules, which essentially sees properties sold back to their original owners if they want them for market value. Now, many of the people who lived on this estate at the time have told me over the years that there's no way they'd come back after all the hassle and upset they went through when they had to move away. But interestingly, as I say, this route change was in 2016. So between 2013 and 2016, the route was going up past the Meadowhall shopping centre. We've known for 5 years now that it's not going to go there anymore. But yet, not one of the properties which was bought by HS2 during that period has yet been sold. So it's an interesting question as to when these properties will actually be sold, Liam. So we await for the results of that review that the government's currently undertaking.
So briefly, Kevin, what's your best guess after all the sleuthing around that you've done? Do you think leg 2B of HS2 from Birmingham to Leeds will happen or not?
Well, you've asked me the simplest question with the complicated answer. I suspect we've had a lot of talk in the past, potentially, about the issue being one of money, that the government just physically can't afford to pay for the route to come through here, and that's led to the compromises that we saw from Grant Shapps with the integrated rail review. Now, could you see an option whereby this route stays on the table for some future point where they do have the money? That still could potentially be an option, and it's something a lot of people living along this route are fearful of, Liam.
Very interesting. Thanks, Kevin Larkin, our Yorkshire and Humber reporter in Doncaster there. And I must mention a Department for Transport spokesman has told GB News, we recognise the impact that HS2 has had on residents on the proposed line, and that's why our compensation schemes go far beyond what the law requires. The government's now committed to explore the most effective way to run HS2 trains to Leeds. And it's important we safeguard properties until final decisions are taken. A failure to do so would cost the taxpayer more and cause greater uncertainty for residents. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, it's today's Money Talks interview with Steve Hardiman. He's the managing director of the engineering firm Clevedon Fasteners. He'll be telling us how his company managed through lockdown and the impact of the pandemic on the manufacturing industry across the whole of the UK.
I think
The pandemic has changed a lot of things, and one of the things that it has changed is I don't think we'll ever go back to the supply chains that we had. And the reason for that are manyfold, but one of them is the fact that people have suddenly realised, you know what, if I can't get it on a boat, my factory stops. I need to have something that I can get.
That's coming up, but before that, it's the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. The Cabinet are expected to hold a meeting this afternoon to discuss the latest situation around COVID-19. Some ministers have reportedly pushed back against calls from scientific advisors for new restrictions before Christmas. According to the Times newspaper, around a third of the Cabinet are said to be reluctant to introduce new measures in the next few days. Hospitality leaders are urging the Chancellor to offer emergency financial support in the next 24 hours. It's after a fall in bookings and cancellations due to Omicron. The operator of the Real Greek and Franco Manca restaurant chains say rescue packages are needed regardless of whether new measures are introduced. The government says support for businesses is being kept under constant review. The Deputy Prime Minister has denied his colleagues broke lockdown rules after a picture emerged showing the Prime Minister and his staff having cheese and wine in the Downing Street garden during the first national lockdown. The Guardian newspaper released the photo showing the Prime Minister drinking at a table with Carrie Johnson and with two others. There were 16 other staff members nearby. Dominic Raab stressed the garden was a place of work and that sometimes staff would have a drink after a long day or a long week. In other news, now the sandwich chain Pret a Manger has been told that it should consider renewing its advertising campaign for a £20 a month coffee subscription. It's advice from the Advertising Standards Authority. Pret subscribers can choose 5 drinks every day as part of the deal. Customers, though, have complained that they were often unable to get smoothies on the deal. Many shops said they were unable to make them. You're up to date. I'll have more for you at 2 o'clock.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Lots of you have been getting in touch about our earlier discussion, all about surviving the financial cost of Christmas. Johnny says people on legacy benefits didn't get a £20 uplift during the pandemic, and most were told to self-isolate, bringing up their electric and gas bills. How do you think they're going to get on over Christmas? A lot of us are not going to have a good Christmas because our necks We are up to our necks in debt. Alan says you have to cross so many hurdles to get anything from the government. Many people like me are not willing to go through all that rigmarole. And Robert says, I wonder how many people would be able to have some sort of Christmas if they didn't smoke and drink. I'm not knocking people for their habits, just saying this expense is totally in their control. Big range of views there from GB News viewers. Keep your emails coming. We appreciate them. And it's time now for my daily interview series. It's Money Talks. Now, today we're going to hear from Steve Hardiman. He's the Managing Director of Clevedon Fasteners. Based in Sutton Coldfield in the West Midlands, the company manufactures cold-form components for use in commercial and automotive markets worldwide. It was formed in 1939, no less, to supply the aircraft industry. And Clevedon Fasteners specialises in bespoke production with components heat-treated or plated to any commercially available finish. This is a relatively small but a very well-known, even an iconic company. And here to tell us about it for my latest Money Talks interview is Clevedon Fasteners boss, Steve Hardiman. Steve, what would you say to those people who say the UK isn't a world-class manufacturer?
Well, I've been in manufacturing for many, many years, and for many years manufacturing's been looked down on, I think, by various political parties of all colours. I think from memory there's about 2.7 million people involved in manufacturing. 48% of our exports are from manufacturing. The average salary in manufacturing is about 32,500.
It's a lot higher than the average.
It's a good business. It's a good thing to be in, but it's not promoted very well. A lot of political parties have sort of shied away from manufacturing because it's in the too difficult box, in my opinion.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think we have this rather cold attitude towards manufacturing across our political and media class? And I agree with you. I think the attitude is definitely there.
I think it's because service industries are a lot easier. Basically, manufacturing takes investment, it takes a lot of hard work, and it takes training. I'm not saying for 1 minute that the service industry doesn't require that, but it's a lot easier, and there's a lot of investors that are very, very short term in terms of trying to get returns, and manufacturing is a more long-term investment. So people like in Germany, they invest enormously in manufacturing, and it's the reason that their turnover is, or their GDP is very high in manufacturing. We don't have very high figures in manufacturing in the UK. So basically, I think it's in the too difficult box. We export all over the world. I mean, one of the things which always amazes me about manufacturing is I think there's 280,000 companies that manufacture in the UK. Of those, certainly in 2019, the figure I think was about 35,000 of them export. We make rivets. They're basically, in terms of technology, probably one up from a nail. If we can export, anybody can export. And I don't understand why people are so frightened to export. It's a big world out there. One of our biggest export markets up until recently was the Far East. And that's like selling coals to Newcastle. Well, if we can do it, anybody can do it.
A lot of people will be surprised. You deliberately, modest guy, you're downplaying what is a very successful business, a business that you took over and own and operate there in Sutton Coldfield. You are one of the world's leading makers of particular industrial fasteners and rivets and so on. How can you make that pay here in the UK when the Chinese, the Taiwanese, the Vietnamese are doing the same thing?
Quite simple, Liam. Really good people. We've got a fantastic workforce. 32 people in proper jobs that have been with us for a very, very long time. In the last 30 odd years that I've been involved, I think 10 people have left our company of their own volition. and of those 6 have come back. So, you know, we've got some really, really good people who, when you cut them, it says Clevedon Fasteners through them. They work very, very hard. And oddly, the pandemic has been quite an eye-opener for us.
In what way? That's interesting.
Yeah, basically our performance has just gone through the roof. In terms of our productivity, it's gone up by 37% during the pandemic.
Wow. And how do you explain that?
We've been in business a long time, and we've had lots of people come through the door explaining to us about teamwork and about how you get more productivity out of your employees. We've listened, and our productivity stayed pretty much the same. And then the pandemic hit. And basically, we had to change what we do. And what we did was a bit outrageous. Some of our people had to leave, unfortunately. But we don't have a production manager, we don't have an ops manager. The guys on the shop floor determine what's going on what machines. That has reduced our headcount. And in pre-pandemic, we were producing 24 million pieces a month. We're now producing 32 million pieces a month.
With a smaller workforce?
With a smaller workforce.
So basically your shop floor workers have
Yep.
stepped up
Yep.
and become
Yep.
middle managers.
Yeah, but an odd thing, we did something again which is counterintuitive. We went to 4 days instead of working 5 days. We used to work 5 days and overtime weekends. We went to 4 days, 4 10-hour days, very, very much more productive. The only overtime we run now is on a Friday to sort of when we have to mop stuff up. But the other thing that's happened is, for some reason, and I think it's mainly to do with a lot of our product being in construction, our order book has just gone through the roof, absolutely through the roof. So
We should explain, governments around the world are using infrastructure spending, they're promoting construction of housing and buildings in order to kickstart their economies post-pandemic. We're seeing that across the Western world, across the Asian economies too, and you're benefiting from that big infrastructure build globally.
Absolutely, but we're at the coal face, and so we're just humble rivet manufacturers, and basically we've looked at it and we've tried to work out why this has happened. And the main reason is there are two main drivers as far as we're concerned. I understand exactly what you're saying about, you know, what governments have done. As a manufacturer, I think if you look for governments to help you out, you're basically going to be very, very disappointed. So the reason for the great increase in our turnover is, firstly, in the construction area, it's because a lot of people didn't go on holiday. So they've all put double glazing in, they've all had refurbished the houses, and construction has benefited from that.
And they need your fasteners for all those components.
You know, if you've got double glazing and you go and look at your hinges, if ever you want to go and look at your hinges in double glazing, you'll find our rivets are in there. So we supply the window hinge businesses all over the world. We supply India, we supply China, we supply obviously the UK. So that's the first thing. But the second thing, from a fastener point of view, is because of the pandemic, we've had a problem with supply chains, and particularly with the transport of goods from China to the UK. Pre-pandemic, if you were going to buy a container from China, £800 for a full container load. We were quoted $12,500 recently. Now, the key thing about that is, and again, and I know you're an economist, and I'm afraid economists tend to be lagging rather than looking forward.
Couldn't agree more. That's why you're here.
We had the stuff that we buy in from China, and we've got to deal with our workforce. We only buy stuff in from China that we can't turn a buck on in the UK.
Yeah.
So they know all about it. And it's not very much that we buy, but when we do buy it, we buy in a container load. A full container load might be 60 grand's worth of goods. 12,500 quid on top of that.
For the container, for the transport
Just
itself.
for the transport.
It just destroys the transaction.
Absolutely.
Everything's not worth it.
And so consequently, a lot of people who were very happy buying everything from Taiwan are now knocking on our door and saying, can you make
So you're
for us?"
actually benefiting from the supply chain
Absolutely.
issues because
Without a doubt.
you are part of the trend, Stephen, of Cleveland Fasteners is part of the trend of what's called onshoring.
Reshoring.
Yeah.
Get it, absolutely. Make it in
We've
the
been
UK.
going global for years,
Yep.
but what the pandemic's done, because it's emphasised distance and the logistical issues of worldwide transportation, people have been sourcing components more locally.
That's right.
And if they want their rivets, if they want their fasteners, that makes you even more attractive to anyone who needs
Yep.
that stuff in Western Europe compared to the Chinese.
Indeed, if people want stuff and they've given us the order, we're just down the road.
But aren't you going to then lose a lot of that business when the global economy reboots and
Yeah.
these supply chains start to operate more smoothly? We can stop thinking about supply chains because they're just there.
Yeah. I think the pandemic has changed a lot of things, and one of the things that it has changed is I don't think we'll ever go back to the supply chains that we had, and the reason for that are manyfold, but one of them is the fact that people have suddenly realised, you know what, if I can't get it on a boat, my factory stops. I need to have something that I can get. It might not all come back, Liam, but some of it will come back, certainly.
Because the pandemic has emphasised to entrepreneurs and other people that need to buy inputs the insecurity that they were working under, that the supply may stop because it's on the other side of the world. Better to have a bloke in Sutton Coldfield.
That's right, yeah, absolutely. And, me and my FD, Charles Hopkins,
Your finance director.
Yeah, we bought into the business sort of in 2000. We look very, very carefully at what's the causation of things, and particularly with regard to our order book and so on and so forth. And these are the things that we're finding are the reasons.
Now, I know back in 2000 when you bought the business, it was all going swimmingly. Then 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
Global aerospace industry went into lockdown effectively for quite a long time. Planes weren't allowed to fly and so on. At that time, I think a third of your order book was the aerospace industry.
Absolutely.
That must have been a frightening experience.
It sort of
you just bought into the company.
Yeah, it makes you think twice about your house. That's for sure. We were in dire straits. We just bought in. A third of the turnover disappears. My export manager at the time said, "Look, if we're going to go down, let's go down fighting." So we went to our first ever exhibition.
You really thought the business might fold?
We'd taken on a lot of debt.
Yeah.
We got to service this debt somehow. So basically, we went to our first exhibition, which was Automechanica in Germany. And for years, we'd been told how rubbish UK manufacturers were, how bad we were at doing things, that our quality was rubbish. Whether it was Labour, whether it was Conservative, I'm not making a party political point. Everybody said, UK manufacturing, rubbish. We went to this exhibition. We had queues of people on the stand because they'd never seen a fastener manufacturer from the UK. And from that exhibition, we not only recovered the 300k, but a lot more. And also, we went from zero exporting to 38 countries worldwide. So, and a lot of the people who came to see us were from the accession companies, the European accession companies.
Yeah, for Eastern
European, Poland and Czechoslovakia and places like that.
Back then, they'd just joined the EU, hadn't they?
Yep.
2003.
And the great thing about them was they believe in the UK manufacturers because they believe in Britain and trust. And they came. I can show you invoices that I've got from companies in China where the local manufacturers are a fifth of our price, and they're buying them from us and shipping them from the UK to China. And there's only one reason for that, and that's UK quality and the fact that you can trust UK business. It's as simple as that. And people, and again, I'm not making a party political point, you hear about many years ago, Red Robbo, and how rubbish.
So these are trade union leaders of the 70s.
Yeah, of the 70s who.
When we were kids, we'd watch the news and the likes of British Leyland, world-class car brands were being destroyed by the trade unions.
Absolutely destroyed. But along with that, it all gave manufacturing a bad name, and from that, we've never recovered. And you never pick up a newspaper and say, here's a good news story. Apart from perhaps the Gigafactory that's recently been put in Sunderland, here's a good manufacturing story. I'm very pleased to say that GB News choose to actually promote good news stories, and particularly in manufacturing, but very few other outlets do. And from that point of view, people think, particularly youngsters coming into manufacturing, perhaps it's not for me. Perhaps all of this negativity is right. It's not. It's the best kind of business in the world. And when everybody went to services, we know how well that ended in 2008. So when somebody thought it was a good idea to start selling subprime mortgages, so you've got to be a bit careful. You need a balance in your economy, and the government really needs to step up and start understanding manufacturing, because they clearly don't at the moment.
And that was the Managing Director of Clevedon Fasteners, Steve Hardiman. You can listen to the full 25-minute version of that interview, plus dozens of other extended Money Talks interviews, now on my Money Talks podcast, or via the GB News YouTube channel, or via the GB News app. You've been watching On The Money with me, Liam Halligan. Thanks for joining me today. I'll be back tomorrow for more economics, business and consumer news at 1 p.m. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to be joined by a colleague for the next hour. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On The Money.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. It's simply more of the same for many of us today. Cloudy again across large parts of the country. Something a little brighter in the east as the cloud lifts, and somewhat breezy in the southwest on the edge of this area of high pressure where the isobars are a little closer together. Now this cold front, barely noticeable on the map there, will introduce some slightly drier air and higher cloud bases, I think, through the afternoon across parts of eastern Scotland into eastern England. And that will, although keeping things cloudy, turn things a little brighter into the afternoon. Whilst low cloud sits further west, covering the hills, bringing a few spots of drizzle, there will be some broken cloud. West Wales, western parts of England, western Scotland. Some sunshine coming through here. A breezy afternoon to come in the far southwest. And feeling a little on the cold side, but temperatures not far from average for the time of year. Into the evening and overnight, as that higher cloud drifts west, there will be some breaks developing, especially in the west and through central parts. And where that happens, we'll see a touch of frost, temperatures dipping 0 to -2 Celsius. Otherwise, low single figures to start things off on Tuesday. Again, a lot of cloud covering the map, but I think a better chance through the day of some cloud breaks, especially for parts of Wales into central western England, and where we see some cloud breaks, some decent sunny spells emerging. So for a lucky few, a sunny day, but for many, another cloudy day, and a bit colder again.